There is a kind of change that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a storm, a revelation, or the overwhelming certainty that something is different. It arrives the way a house settles after years of wait, in small, almost inaudible shifts in the structure beneath you. You do not feel the boards moving. You feel the morning differently. You feel your own thoughts landing in a new arrangement. You stand in a life that looks identical from the outside and discover, slowly, that you are no longer holding it the same way from the inside. Before we go any further, I want to talk about the personal readings that I am offering currently. What I am offering right now is a personal wealth reading with a specific focus on 2026. It is built from your exact name, date of birth, time of birth, and place of birth, so it speaks to your chart, your timing, and your actual financial patterns, not a version of them that fits everyone. You will receive an audio reading delivered to your inbox plus a written report. The link is in the description. Okay, let's get back to the video. Today the moon has reached its last quarter phase, sitting in Aquarius, forming an exact square to the sun in Taurus. That square is not a conflict in the conventional sense, it is an audit. The last quarter moon is the moment in the lunar cycle where the month turns around and faces itself. The building is over, the accumulating is over. What is left now is the question that a last quarter moon always asks, and always asks quietly. What in the structure that I have been building actually belongs here, and what was I just carrying because putting it down felt like admitting something? That question lands differently under Aquarius and Taurus than it does in any other pairing. Taurus, where the sun sits, is the sign of what is real, what you can hold, what has proven itself over time through simple, physical, undeniable evidence. Taurus does not trade in ideas or intentions. It trades in what is still standing after the conversation ends. The sun in Taurus is the part of you right now that knows what is real about your life, what has genuine weight, and what has been surviving only on the energy you have been pouring into it. The moon in Aquarius is the part of you that has been watching from the outside. Aquarius is the observer. It is the sign that steps back far enough to see the system rather than just the individual pieces. The moon there does not feel its way through a situation the way a water sign moon does. It thinks its way through feeling, which means it can see patterns that the emotional body alone cannot identify. Under a moon in Aquarius, something clicks into view that you had not been able to see before, not because the information was absent, but because you were too close to it. Put these two together in a square and you have your own inner architecture asking to be inspected. Architecture is not decoration. It is not surface. It is the arrangement of load-bearing elements beneath everything you can see. The beams inside the walls, the foundation beneath the floor, the structure that determines not how a building looks, but how it holds. And just as a physical structure accumulates stress in ways that are invisible until something gives, your inner life accumulates weight in places you rarely examine directly. The last quarter moon is the moment when the cycle creates enough pressure for that inner examination to become unavoidable. It is the phase that strips away momentum. During the new moon, you plant. During the first quarter, you build against resistance. During the full moon, you see the result. But the last quarter has a different function entirely. It is the moment when the emotional body asks, without softness, whether what you built is actually what you intended to build, or whether the building just happened while you were focused on other things. Under Aquarius, this question comes without the emotional charge that makes it easy to avoid. Aquarius is not cruel, but it is clear. It does not soften what it sees by layering feeling over observation. It simply shows you the structure as it is. And what it is showing you today, with the sun in Taurus providing the honest weight of material reality, is something worth paying genuine attention to. What you will notice today, if you are paying attention, is a quality of quiet taking stock. Not anxiety, not urgency, just a clear-eyed reckoning with what you have been maintaining, what is actually holding, and what has been consuming energy without giving anything back in return. the architecture of your commitments, the architecture of your beliefs about what is possible for you, the architecture of how you have been spending your hours, the architecture of who you have been willing to become and who you have been quietly refusing to become, even while telling yourself you were open to change. Saturn is in Aries right now, and that placement is worth understanding clearly. Saturn in Aries is not comfortable. Aries wants to move, to begin, to act without looking back. Saturn wants to build correctly, which means it will slow Aries' energy down and force it to answer for the impulses that Aries would rather leave unexamined. The result is a tension between the part of you that wants to begin and the part of you that is demanding that this beginning be built on something real. Jupiter remains in Cancer, and its presence in that sign through the first half of 2026 is one of the most significant emotional backdrops of the year. Jupiter in Cancer expands the emotional foundations of things. It makes feelings larger, roots deeper, and the private inner world more vivid and more active than usual. When your emotional foundations expand, the things buried within them also expand. Old memories become more present. Old longings become louder. The things you have settled for, which once felt like reasonable compromises, begin to feel more obviously insufficient. This is because the Sun in Taurus rules the material world with a directness that no other sign matches. Taurus does not speak in abstractions about abundance. It speaks in what is in your account, what you own, what has value you can touch. And the last quarter moon squaring that Taurus Sun is applying pressure specifically to the beliefs and structures that have been governing your financial reality. Most people carry an inner architecture around money that they did not consciously choose. It was built from what they observed growing up, from what they heard said about people who had more or less than their family, from early experiences of scarcity or abundance that left impressions in the emotional body long before the rational mind was developed enough to evaluate them. Those impressions become load-bearing walls inside you. They determine, often below the level of conscious awareness, what you believe you are allowed to have, what you believe is available to you, and how much effort you believe is required to generate a certain amount of resource. The last quarter moon in Aquarius sees these structures with unusual clarity. Aquarius is the sign that can observe a system from outside it, which means it can observe your financial belief system from a position that the beliefs themselves cannot occupy. And what it often sees, looking at the inner architecture around money that most people carry, is a structure that was built for someone else's life, built for the family you came from, built in response to fears that were someone else's fears first, built along dimensions that were never actually measured against what is true for you. Saturn in Aries reinforces this audit. Saturn rules structure and Aries rules new beginnings. The transit of Saturn through Aries from 2026 onward is asking, at a collective level, what structures are we going to rebuild from their actual foundations, rather than simply reinforcing what was already there? That question is personal before it is collective. And for you on this day, it sounds like this. What do you actually believe about your capacity to generate and hold wealth in 2026? And is that belief built from evidence or from inherited assumption? Venus is in the early degrees of Gemini right now, having moved there just days ago. Venus in Gemini brings curiosity and flexibility to questions of value and resource. It opens options. It invites exploration of different approaches, different ideas, different ways of thinking about what has value and how to move toward it. This is a useful energy to have alongside a last quarter moon audit, because it means that once you have seen the structure clearly, there is a genuine flexibility available about what might replace what you are releasing. But Venus in Gemini also carries a shadow. Its shadow is the tendency to explore so many options that none of them are committed to collect possibilities the way some people collect objects, adding to the pile without ever deciding what belongs. The last quarter moon in Aquarius, with its instinct for structural efficiency, is the counterweight to that shadow. It sees which of the options you have been entertaining are genuinely load-bearing and which are simply interesting. In a chart that also includes Saturn in Aries demanding honest commitment, the distinction between an interesting idea and a real one matters enormously. The North Node remains in Pisces, which adds a spiritual dimension to everything the material planets are working with right now. The North Node in Pisces is a collective invitation toward trust, toward the willingness to release control and allow something larger than your immediate plans to participate in how things unfold. In financial terms, this means that what is being asked of you in 2026 is not simply better strategy, though strategy matters. It is a genuine shift in the emotional relationship you have with what you are building, from a relationship of anxious control to a relationship of directed trust. Aries, your square from the moon falls across your identity and your resources. The audit today is not about whether you are brave enough to continue. It is about whether what you are building serves the person you are actually becoming, rather than the person who began the project. Those two people are not identical. Saturn in your own sign is making sure you know that. Taurus, the sun is in your sign, which means this last quarter moon lands with particular directness. The moon in your 11th house of community is asking whether the people around you are genuinely aligned with where you are going, or whether you are carrying relationships from loyalty rather than resonance. The audit today is about whether your resources flow in directions that match your actual values. Gemini, Venus arrived in your sign just days ago, and something in your relational and creative world has opened up. The last quarter moon today asks you to look at the beliefs you carry about your own voice and your ability to be taken seriously by the people whose opinions matter to you. There is a structure inside you around self-expression that was built when you were younger, and it does not accurately reflect what you are capable of now. Cancer, Jupiter in your sign is expanding everything, which is simultaneously wonderful and exhausting. The last quarter moon today lands across your 8th house of depth and shared resources. Something that has been building emotionally beneath the surface of your life is ready to be named. Not to be fixed immediately, not to be resolved in a single day, but to be named honestly, because you cannot work with what you have not acknowledged. Jupiter is holding you. The naming is safe. Leo, the last quarter moon activates your 7th house of partnership and your 1st house of self. This is a direct confrontation between what you want for yourself and what you have been agreeing to in your closest relationships. Not hostile, clarifying. You may realize today that something you have been framing as compromise is actually closer to suppression. Leo energy does not serve its relationships by becoming smaller, it serves them by remaining fully itself. Virgo, you feel this quarter moon across your 6th house of daily work and your 12th house of what is hidden. There is something in your routine consuming far more energy than it is returning. You already know what it is. What this moon does is remove the last excuse you had for not addressing it. The most efficient use of your energy right now is not doing more things, but doing fewer with genuine commitment. Libra, this quarter moon activates your 5th house of creative expression and your 11th house of future vision. There is a dream you have been holding in a kind of suspended state, not pursuing it fully, not releasing it fully, just carrying it. The architecture of that dream needs honest examination. Is it something you genuinely want, or something you have kept out of reluctance to admit the desire has changed? Either answer is acceptable. The only costly answer is the one you are not willing to give. Scorpio, Pluto is your ruling planet and it is now retrograde in Aquarius, turning the deep transformation inward with greater intensity. Something Scorpio has been working to transform in the external world is being redirected. The real transformation is interior, not exterior. The structure being rebuilt is not your circumstances. It is the interior relationship you have with your own power and what you believe you are allowed to do with it. Sagittarius, this quarter moon falls across your 3rd house of thought and your 9th house of belief and philosophy. There is an idea you have been carrying about how the world works that is no longer accurate, and you have been aware of its inaccuracy for longer than you have been willing to admit. Holding on to that idea now costs more than releasing it. Jupiter in Cancer is asking Sagittarius to trust emotional intelligence alongside intellectual intelligence. Let those two things be allies rather than rivals. Capricorn, the moon in your second house of resources and the sun in your fifth house of creative risk create an interesting audit today. You have been cautious with your resources, which is characteristic of Capricorn. But Saturn in Aries is asking whether that caution has become a reflex rather than a strategy. There is a creative direction that has been waiting for you to give it proper resources. The reason you have not is worth examining honestly today. Aquarius, the moon is in your own sign today, which means the audit is deeply personal. The last quarter moon in your first house of identity asks you to look at the version of yourself you have been presenting to the world and to assess whether it still fits the person you have been becoming. Aquarius is the sign of reinvention, but reinvention requires first acknowledging what needs to be released. The structure you have outgrown is not a failure, it is evidence that you grew. Pisces, the north node is in your sign, and today the last quarter moon activates your 12th house of inner life and your 6th house of physical reality. There is a spiritual understanding you have been reaching toward that is now asking to be grounded in practical action. Not dissolved into the material world, but given a foothold in it. The architecture that needs building today is the one that connects your inner knowing to the way you actually spend your time. Trust is not only a feeling, it is also a practice. A last quarter moon does not close a chapter in a single day, it begins a closing. The days between a last quarter and the following new moon, which arrives on May 16th of 2026 in Taurus, are designed for release, for completion, for setting down what cannot travel into the next cycle with you. Pluto is retrograde in Aquarius, and this matters for understanding what May 9th is doing beneath the surface of daily life. When Pluto moves retrograde, it does not stop transforming things, it redirects the transformation inward. The question it asks is not what changed around you, but what changed in you as a result. Whether you have actually absorbed the lessons of what the outer world has been showing you, or whether you have been watching the external changes without allowing them to rewrite anything fundamental about how you understand yourself. May 9th, with its last quarter moon, is an ideal access point for that Pluto retrograde question. The inner architecture that the moon is revealing today is precisely the material that Pluto retrograde is working to reconstruct. The beliefs that no longer hold weight, the emotional load-bearing walls built from fears that have since been dissolved by experience, the definitions of security, wealth, and success that were inherited rather than chosen. Saturn in Aries is not subtle about what it wants from you during this period. It wants you to identify one thing, specifically one, that you are genuinely ready to begin building correctly. Not adding to an existing structure that has foundational problems, not patching something that needs to be rebuilt. Beginning with honesty and real commitment, one thing that reflects who you actually are in 2026 rather than who you were when the old architecture was first constructed. Jupiter in Cancer supports this through the emotional root system it has been expanding all year. The emotional foundation that Jupiter is growing in your life right now is not comfort for its own sake. It is structural support. It is the deep root system that allows new architecture to hold weight without needing to be defended through anxiety. What Jupiter in Cancer is building in you, quietly and steadily, is the capacity to hold something real without fear of losing it. The Venus in Gemini influence adds something important to the days following this last quarter moon. In the space between today and the new moon in Taurus on May 16th, Venus in Gemini will bring conversations, connections, and ideas that carry genuine potential. Some of what arrives will be genuinely worth pursuing. Some will be interesting without being load-bearing. The inner architecture work that the last quarter moon is inviting today will make it significantly easier to tell the difference. The practical action for today is not complex. Find 20 minutes of genuine quiet and ask yourself one question without rushing to answer it. What in my life right now is load-bearing, and what am I only maintaining because I started it? You do not need to resolve the answer in a single sitting. Look clearly enough and honestly enough to see what is actually there. What you see will shape what you carry into the next lunar cycle. And the next lunar cycle, beginning with a new moon in Taurus on May 16th, will ask you to plant something that belongs to who you are now. Not who you were, not who you thought you would be by this point. Who you actually are, with the honest measure of what you have learned and what you are genuinely ready to build. The quiet rewriting that began today is not a disruption, it is a recalibration. The kind that only becomes visible in retrospect, when you look back from somewhere further along and realize that everything changed not in a single dramatic moment, but in a series of honest adjustments you were brave enough to make when a last quarter moon in Aquarius showed you, without noise, exactly what needed to shift. The sky is doing that work right now. Your only task is to be honest enough to let it.